wasn't built in a day. But we're going to build a fictional nation together in an afternoon. Welcome to Worldbuilder's Sketchbook. In my opinion, a good nation has the following 3 qualities. Number 1, it has a core idea or gimmick. This is what sets your nation apart from others. Is it based on an underappreciated real-world nation, religion, or concept? Is its ruler unusual? What about the land that it's built on? Number 2, it has an identity and a culture. This is what gives your nation depth and makes people want to engage with it and its people. This can be shaped by things like the gods they worship, their moral codes, and the structure of their government. And lastly, number 3, it has a conflict. Conflict is what gives your characters something to engage with. Is your nation at war? With whom? What do the leaders want? Does this align with what its people want? What are they doing to get what they want? The core idea is what gets people interested and makes them want to learn more. The identity and culture make people want to engage with your setting. And finally, the conflict is what makes people actually able to engage with it. We've established some guidelines for what makes a good nation, so let's get to building. I normally don't have a step-by-step process for this, but I always start by coming up with a core idea or gimmick. For a while now, I've had in my head the idea of a kingdom ruled by an ancient dragon. I think it'd be really cool if the current ruler has been ruling the nation since its inception. So that's where we're going to start. In the world that I'm building this nation for, a dragon gains power from its horde. I won't get too much into the details since that's not what this video is about, but I'll go over a few basics. Some dragons hoard not just gold, but knowledge, secrets, and power. In this case, the dragon's hoard will be the kingdom itself. All its citizens, land, buildings, roads, and even its culture are the dragon's hoard. Alright, so we have a solid idea to start with, and already we have some stuff to define the culture of our nation. For example, since the nation itself is the dragon's hoard, and the king is a dragon, we have the perfect reason to make this an expansionist nation. Our nation is ruled by a dragon king who is continuously expanding to gain more land and citizens to add to its hoard. In this case, the conflict kind of also writes itself. Imagine if the place that the nation wants to expand into already has inhabitants of its own or is otherwise hard to settle in. From here, I will call upon knowledge that I already know from real-world European kingdoms to try to flesh everything out. I know from my high school history class that medieval European kingdoms were built on a feudalist system. Lords owned land and peasants tended to it. These lords often had royal blood, so let's say that all the nobles in the kingdom have dragon blood in them. The most royal of them can be humanoid dragon creatures that we'll call dragonkin, which are legally distinct from Dragonborn in Dungeons & Dragons. I also like the idea that maybe some people with royal blood are mostly humanoid with maybe a few scales in some parts of their bodies. I also know from high school history class that kings were said to rule by divine right, meaning that they were a holy figure to their kingdom appointed by capital G God himself to rule. In this world, however, the gods that created the world are all dead, leaving behind only divine mementos that people worship. Perhaps the Dragon King himself is one of these mementos. People worship him, and he grants clerics their power. Perhaps he's a demigod child of one of these dead gods. Alright, I am really liking how this nation is coming together so far. By this point, I'll normally have a small list of ideas that I want to slot in somewhere. This time around, I only really have 2 of these ideas. 1, kobolds, which are small goblin-like creatures with relation to dragons in D&D and Pathfinder. And number 2, drake mounts, which would be smaller, like animalistic dragons that don't really have the intelligence of normal dragons, but they're going to be ridden like noble steeds. For some ideas, like the drake mounts, the idea is nearly the finished product. If we just add that these are bred by and given to royalty, knights, and heroes as a sign of status, then we really have all we need. Unfortunately, at this point, I've exhausted my background knowledge of medieval European kingdoms, so I'm going to do some research on medieval Europe. Here we can find new ideas to flesh the place out, as well as find places to slot in other floating ideas. I always do research on my inspirations whenever I'm world building anything. This often is where I get so much of the depth that I include in my worlds. This time around, I was reminded that the European Middle Ages were also known for plagues and diseases. Namely, the Black Death was an epidemic in the 1300s that completely wrecked Europe and halved its population. Inspired by this, I wanted to add some depth to the kingdom by having it ravaged by a magical disease. My idea is to have it be some kind of side effect of being part of the dragon's horde. I also want to give it some kind of visual indicator just to make it more unique. What if the infected would grow dragon-like scales on their bodies? I like this idea, but since I already had established that people in my world that had dragon blood in them were royals, I feel like this would probably muddy up the lore and visual language of the world. But then again, having two groups of opposite status with the same physical features could make for an interesting conflict. For now, we're just going to explore some other options. Since dragons traditionally hoard gold, what if the side effect of being part of a dragon's horde is that you literally become treasure? What if the infected grow patches, abscesses, and tumors of pure gold? I really like both of these ideas, but in order to keep my visual language cleaner, I'm gonna go with the gold disease. I'm not saying that either of these ideas are better than the other, it's really a matter of preference and the story you want to tell. For now, I'm just gonna move forward with the gold disease, and I'm gonna name it Aurumosis, or the Gold Plague, since aurum is the Latin word for gold. I didn't find anywhere in my research to slide kobolds in super neatly, but that happens sometimes and you just have to keep it in your notes for a later place or even a later world. Alright, now it's the hardest part. We need to give our nation a name. We have a kingdom ruled by a dragon, so let's try and name it after that. I very often mix two words and or throw related words into Google Translate until I find something that I like. Starting with Latin, we get Draco and Regnum. I guess that's how you pronounce that?
Regnum.
When plugging in dragon and kingdom. Not a huge fan of either of those, so I futzed around with a bunch of different related words and translated them into a bunch of different languages, but ultimately I couldn't find anything I liked more rather than the simple English name of Dragon Crown, so that's what we're gonna go with. I'm in love with what we were able to come up with together, and I hope that this will help you sketch out your own worlds. If you want a fully fleshed out, written, and organized version of this kingdom, then you're gonna have to wait until I finish writing it. This kingdom is part of a TTRPG campaign setting that I'm writing based on a whimsical high fantasy world where the gods have all destroyed each other in a divine war, leaving only mementos for people to worship. If that sounds like your kind of thing, then subscribe and stick around. Bye!